Today's dedication is for Zahn, who gave me a very generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Urza Chief Artificer versus Edgar Markov, Jodah and Queza. 2-lander with a Wayfarer's Bauble and Burnished Heart is okay. Not the greatest hand, but hopefully we'll get into some more acceleration. Otherwise we're just limping our way up to cracking the Burnished Heart here. Seen a turn 1 Vampire in Stromkirk Noble, so that obviously came in with a token. I'd rather not bolt this in. If we can get away with not playing it at all as a land, then that would be great. And we just drew into a Flooded Strand, so we will fix our colours as well as getting down a turn 1 Wayfarer's Bauble here. Another 1 mana Vampire that is Insolent Neonate this time. So we got the 1/1 and the Noble turned into a 2/2, went in at Queza. Alright, drawing into lands is decent, so we'll just play the island and I'm going to crack the Bauble. I don't think our opponents are going to play around the fact that we're holding up mana. Let's go for a Plains, because the Urborg fixes our colours and it's not likely anyone's going to blow up the Urborg. We'll go for some more black mana at some point, hopefully. Maybe with the Burnished Heart. Spellbook Vendor. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you can pay a generic. If you do create a Sorcerer Roll token and put it on a creature, that is the one that gives +1/+1, and when it attacks, scry 1. The 5 colour player fixes the colours indefinitely with a Chromatic Lantern. So I think in the next few turns we're looking to go for an Austere command after we've fixed our mana, and then start the game from there. Another 1-drop is the Vampire Cutthroat, so hopefully this player won't be able to refill his hand with something like a Skull Clamp in the meantime. 2/2 down the middle will become a 3/3. Couple of tokens to the left and we do not get the Neonate, that goes down the middle as well. 2/2 blocks a token, and okay, there's an Ethereum Sculptor, so what we could do here, yeah, we can get down the Ethereum Sculptor and then go for a 2 mana Burnished Heart, so that actually works out quite nicely for us. Fix everyone's black mana while we do it. This does mean I was thinking of going for artifacts when we wipe the board, but it might be that we just have to go for small creatures, which means we lose out on our own Ethereum Sculptor, so maybe shouldn't have played that out, but we'll see. Might not have to go for a board wipe at all, we can encourage our opponents to go for it instead. Chasm Skulker for the Esper player, and decides to pay the 1 mana on the Spellbook Vendor, so puts the enchantment onto itself, and it can attack in with Vigilance this turn, so it's now a 3/3 and we'll get the Scry. 6 cards in hand at the moment. Attacks the Vampire player, who only has a Skulking Lifelinker and a token held up for blocks. Another Mana Rock for Jodah in the form of an Arcane Signet, and Animar, Soul of Elements, will not make use of the protection from white with a board wipe from Austere command, but we're not sure if we're going for that yet. Might be worth encouraging the Vampire player to play out some more threats. We're just risking him refilling his hand whilst vomiting his hand onto the board. The longer we wait for a Wrath, Cordial Vampire is really going to unlock the game for him, so as any creature on the battlefield dies, it puts a plus counter on everything, which means Burnished Heart is about to put plus counters on things. 3/3 to the left, tokens to the left. That is a Menace that goes to the left as well. Noteworthy that this has protection from humans, so can only be blocked by the Skulker, so probably takes a lot of this. And that brings it round to our turn. Another land means that once again we can hold on to the Seagate Restoration. So I think it's going to be an intelligent idea to go for a couple of swamps with the Burnished Heart. Noteworthy we could play out the Wormcoil Engine, but I've already played something into a Wrath that I probably shouldn't have done, so we're just attempting to crack the Burnished Heart in response to a block maybe. Queza is the first commander to hit play. 3/3 down the middle. This does have protection from white, so he might be trying to just not make enemies. Scry 1 when it attacks regardless. Veinfire Border Post, haven't seen that cycle in a while, so that enters tapped and adds a Rakdos. Seems as though he's paid the alternate cost with this, so tap the basic for mana, then bounce it back to hand. If he's running low on land drops, then it's alright I suppose. The first plus counter on Animar, as we get the second commander in a row in Jodah the Unifier. No attacks from Animar, just wants to hold back the blockers. We get to hold off on the Burnished Heart here as well, so that they don't have plus counters on their entire army from the Cordial Vampire, like we mentioned. Mutavault has entered play at some point, probably during a previous turn. Nope, they've just played it this turn. You do have to consider Summoning Sickness for that, and it is Summoning Sick, so they must have played it and they've just activated it immediately. Anguished Unmaking straight onto the Queza at sorcery speed, so I'm guessing that the aggro will continue and they're going to continue to swing in this way. But the Vampire player seems to be overextending at the moment. 4-4 to the left again. And the tokens again. The Menace again. They're getting a lifelink Skulker as well. Now if I wanted to be a bit of a dick, I could sacrifice this in response and buff the army, but not going to bother doing that. So they're down to 22 already. The aggro player is aggroing. Now we can sack the Burnished Heart, which puts the plus counters on all the vampires over there. We've only got 2 swamps in the deck, which I might have to fix if we're going to fix mana with Burnished Heart. That does put us on 3 blue and 4 generic though. Brilliant Restoration isn't the worst either, especially after a board wipe, so in that case maybe there's nothing to stop us going Worm Coil Engine. And then if we do want to block or someone wipes the board, then we've got the choice of going for Brilliant Restoration. Although we've got, we need to fix our mana better yet, don't we? Because we only have a couple of white, we'll need 4 white for that. So maybe I'll just go for Seagate and that can help fix our colours for next turn, as well as get a land in here. So we draw a bunch of cards there. Might be that Urza's Saga is going to be a rattlesnake effect that has players start to swing in at us. And we've got no max hand size now thanks to the Seagate Restoration, so don't need to decide on what to discard. We've got 2 fetches as well, which can fix our white mana for the Brilliant Restoration. So I won't quite mind blocking as much with the Ethereum Sculptor. Staggering Insight onto the Chasm Skulker. That is now a 4-4 with lifelink, and it will draw a card and buff itself whenever it hits a player. And they have the mana held up for the Spellbook Vendor as well. So deciding to put an aura onto the Chasm Skulker, making it even bigger. Does this care about counters or power? Yeah, where X is the number of plus counters on it, it gets the squid tokens, so not quite as worried about them buffing things up with the auras. Swings in at us with the 5-5 and scry 1 upon doing so with the Sorcerer token. I think I'm just going to take the damage here and potentially block something from the vampires. Maybe the Stromkirk Noble. That's probably going to swing into the left again actually, because it's got protection from humans. And this being a human, it won't be able to block. Anyway, upon drawing again, that is now a 6-6 with 3 plus counters on it. Hopefully we'll be able to regain some life with the Worm Coil Engine. In fact, we might be able to get away with not wiping the board next turn if we can hold this thing back and use that as a blocker. A Rixsmithese from Jodah, so is going to get a land into play that cascades into Rona. So we're getting to a point where we do want to be wrathing the board really. Small creatures and artifacts would be tempting, to be honest. It wouldn't get rid of the Jodah is the problem, but if this guy doesn't have too many cards in hand, then that might not necessarily be a problem. Taking out Intet would be handy though. So Intet cascades them into Sigarda. Rixsmithese has a couple of slumber counters removed. Untapping the Rona doesn't matter while it's got Summoning Sickness. But they've only got 3 cards left in hand and developing a nice fat army over there. So if we need to chump block with the Ethereum Sculptor, I'll absolutely do it. 10-10 goes in at us as well. As soon as we draw a heap of cards, players start to look in our direction. So if there's only one block we can make with our one creature, then it's best to do it on a big fat creature as opposed to Death by 1,000 Cuts from Edgar Markov. Although that creature dying does buff the army further. So we've got 3 3s to face down now. Only 2 cards left for Edgar Markov. Let's hope he doesn't refill his hand. Plays out his commander, so that is even further buffs. And a lot of damage coming in here is the only problem. This is the issue with me taking a turn off for Seagate Restoration. Maybe it was worth Worm Coil Engine trying to hold things back. 3-3 tokens to the middle. The 3-3 Menace to the left again. As is the 7-7, so we're being largely ignored. The Skulker goes to the middle. And we get Edgar Markov. That's fair enough. We're getting off pretty lightly there, so Edgar puts a plus counter on itself as well as everything else and is now a 5/5. Everything else gets buffed up by 1 as well. So us going fairly slow has panned out quite nicely because we haven't looked like too much of a threat. We've been able to build up our mana in the background and draw a bunch of cards, and that's the one thing that might have not worked in our favour, is drawing all these cards. That might have drawn too much attention. It looked like it did for the other players, but not for Edgar, thankfully. We could have been down to a very low life total here, so it was a bit of a gamble. Anyway, looks like creatures died there. Still big creatures have survived over here. So Cordial Vampire has triggered 3 times. The Stromkirk buffs itself up even further. That has become massive over the course of the game, thanks to coming down on turn 1. It's now a 12/12. Let's crack this for... I can't remember if I've got the Surveil lands in here or not. This is an old deck. The Surveil lands might not have existed then. Nope. Just a Rafine's Tower will get in. Okay, Mishra's Workshop. Let's work this out. Yeah, if I still had the Ethereum Sculptor in play, then we'd be able to go for Wormcoil Engine. Mishra's Workshop would allow us into that for 5 mana and then Austere Command, but obviously it'd get wiped out and leave tokens behind. If we're looking to reanimate anyway, then that wouldn't have been the worst. But blocking the massive amounts of commander damage is probably a good idea. So I think all we're really doing here is wiping the board and going for the Talisman. We can get Urza's Saga on the go as well. So let's just wipe the board of creatures. And that wipes everything out. It is going to leave a few squid behind, but we're not really worried about that. Cordial Vampire goes on the stack, but doesn't have any vampires to put the counters onto, thankfully. Time to see if Markov has a means of mass reanimation. So 3 Island Walkers left behind. We do have islands in play on 2 sides of the field. Let's see. Yeah, I think I do want to start making construct tokens, so we'll play this one. I'm just conscious of fixing the white mana, but we can do that next turn if we're desperate. So gains the ability of tapping for a mana, and we can just play out the Talisman. It will be our only artifact in play, but I think this is going quite well for us so far. Next turn, if we have a 3 mana commander after the reanimation, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We can afford to do that. It means we're not making a construct with this, but we've got our commander in play for 1 at least. Detective of the Month. And surprisingly, they don't have the City's Blessing yet. They're missing lands quite a bit over here, as is the Jodah player. He's got rocks to make up for that, thankfully. See if we get punished by the Squid player. Now he's taking advantage of the fact that Edgar Markov's shields are down, so he's going to Lightning Bolt. Noteworthy over here, I've just noticed that a plus counter has made it onto Mutavault. And it does stay on there just because it's not a creature anymore. It's still a permanent, so once it's animated again it will be a 3/3. Growing Rites of Itlamok removes a slumber counter. This has 2 slumber counters on it at the moment. See if they manage to get into a card off the Growing Rites. They reveal to us a Chromat. Decides to play the Chromat, so the penultimate counter is removed from a Rixmathes. We'll be seeing that in play next turn most likely. I was thinking what I might like to do is go for Tezzeret and tutor out the Simulacrum Synthesizer that makes construct tokens on big creatures or big artifacts, and then we can get one with the Wormcoil Engine. But now this can have flying, it's probably going to take out the Tezzeret. Might still be worth it. Anyway, we see a Redemption Choir, so that is a 3/3 lifelinker, and it does trigger on attacks as well, so I might be able to start reanimating things if they can get a different powered creature into play next turn. Only 1 card in hand, so they might struggle with that. So it's round to our turn again, see what we draw into. A Bident of Thassa. If we can start making tokens soon, we'll be okay. Speaking of which, level 2 on the Urza's Saga. Got a feeling I'll want to only go for the Brilliant Restoration once we've played and seen the destruction of Wormcoil Engine. So it might be worth getting that out along with our commander this turn. That means that we can actually go for Bident of Thassa, make use of the Metal Craft, and get the full discount on this. So yeah, let's go for Mishra's Workshop, then the Bident of Thassa. And that means that we control the 3 artifacts to go for Esper mana onto our commander. Oh, or not, it's affinity for artifact creatures. Okay, well that's a mistake, so definitely wouldn't have got down the Bident of Thassa, although we can force an opponent to attack with creatures. I don't think that'll be useful though. Yeah, that's a shame. It'll be interesting to see how my opponents deal with the Wormcoil Engine though. They might not want to swing into us. But yeah, definitely would have got down my commander over the Bindant of Thassa there if I'd correctly remembered what it actually has. Affinity for artifact creatures, not artifacts. Key to the vault for the Esper player, still struggling on lands over there. Yeah, obviously could have made a construct here as well, which we'll miss out on now. That would have been handy, although it's not going to be all that massive with only 3 artifacts in play, 4 when the token comes in. Equipping the key to the vault. So this is when it deals combat damage to a player. Look at that many cards on top, exile and on land, and you can cast it without paying the mana cost, which is noteworthy, and it does have island walks, so who do they want to steal things from? They go in down the middle because Jodah's going to have big things to steal. Obviously that's the whole point of Jodah, making massive creatures. Only going to look at one card on the top though, which is noteworthy. It's yeah, it's equal to power, isn't it? Equal to the amount of damage, so they might not get anything, and they do not get anything. I'm guessing they didn't have anything better in hand to do. They're down to 15 life, so they need to find something quickly. If I wanted to encourage my opponents over here to finish this guy off, could have gone for Bindant of Thassa and made him attack there. But whilst I'm durdling around, I'd rather there were a few more players in play to distract each other. Even getting down the Archmage would have been better previously. Playing artifacts into that to at least draw some cards. Anyhow, Arixmathes, now a 15/15, has been animated, doesn't have any means of evasion thankfully, but might... Yeah, we've got a Death Toucher in the way, probably won't swing in towards us. Jodah has been played out, that's where the buffs are coming from. Doesn't have enough creatures to flip the Rights of Itlamok at least. So the 15/15 does encourage the token player to throw a vampire in the way. The 8/8 swings in towards us. Yeah, we've got the option of going for the reanimation next turn, so I might just get rid of this while I can, because a flyer is not good against our Planeswalker, and if we see a board wipe again, it'll be worth getting this down. So trade those out, and we get a 3/3 lifelinker and a Death Toucher as well. And having 2 creatures in play makes the Bindant of Thassa a bit better, and the Urza Chief Artificer is going to be cheaper as well, now that we know what that actually does, or at least I do. Decided to take the damage from this amazingly, so I'm not sure why he was so eager to keep hold of the vamp. Took a massive hit though. Bloodletter Aclazots is the Vampire Demon. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice as much instead. Edgar makes another token, and now they've got no cards in hand. They are able to reanimate something with this though. Let's make them swing in with the token as well, seeing as how I didn't do anything with the Bindant of Thassa anyway. Give them fewer blockers this way. 3/3 lifelinker into the left, could get ganged up on and be destroyed. They'd only lose 1 creature there, so it's probably worth doing actually, especially if he's going to rebuild his board. Takes back the Cordial Vampire. I think I would definitely block this thing before it does too much damage. Only chumping the 3/3 lifelinker, and the token went down the middle against Jodah, so that was going to die either way, no matter where it swung in. So if 2 creatures die, that means the Cordial Vampire buffs everything up by 2, making this thing even more difficult to remove now that it's a 5/5. But maybe Queza has something in hand that he can use to deal with these things. Alright, an Anointed Procession. Do we want to make a token with this before it gets turned into, I don't know, a Sol Ring or a Skull Clamp? Skull Clamp's probably going to be better. Yeah, we can't. I don't think we can afford to tap this for a token, get our commander down and do this, unfortunately. So I will go through to the main phase first, and then we tap it for mana. Didn't make any tokens out of that, which I should have done. I'll get the Clamp as opposed to the Sol Ring, and then let's fix our white mana a bit better. We need 4 white mana, 5 white mana this turn. So definitely go grab some with the Delta, and that returns everything back to play. Oh, I always forget this is an enchantment, isn't it? And I actually forgot this brings back enchantments as well, so we'll get some tokens from this after all, most likely, as well as ramp ourselves a little bit. So we can actually draw some cards with Burnished Heart as well when we eventually sack that. Let's go for the Urza before I mess up again. And yeah, we do have the 2 mana to make a construct with this. So I'll hold that up, do that at instant speed, just in case we want to use the Bident or something. And we now have Menace, so let's swing down the middle, just to gain a little bit of life. And that does mean that we draw a card with the Bident of Thassa. Gets us into a Noxious Gearhulk is nice, so maybe we do go for that tutor that looks for big artifacts after all. Start littering the board with tokens. Not going to bother equipping the Skull Clamp because of this, like I said. So trigger our commander at the end of the turn, we'll get the first token. Been a slow and steady one for us, but we're going to start overtaking here if our opponents don't do anything about us. This is currently a 10-10 with Menace. 1-1 swings in towards us now that we're the threat, see if they can steal anything from us. Okay, managed to get himself into a Will. Scion of Peace, that's not in this deck. Where was he? He was attacking in at us. Oh, it's on the top of your library. Okay, I thought you were stealing things from your opponent. Alright, so Will Scion of Peace he gets off his own library. Aisha is when it attacks, and it can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls 3 or more artifacts. Well, guess where that's going in next turn. Might have to start really piling in towards this guy just to try and get rid of him now that he's starting to get out from underneath his lack of mana. If he can cheat things inconsistently, then he's still going to be a problem. Garth One Eye hopefully will not gain haste. There is going to be a Cascade though. Brings out a Tyrox, which is just one of the new vanilla legends, so a 4-1 for 2 mana. Of course the vanillas aren't too terrible in this deck because this is now an 8-5 for 2 mana. Then Eladamri's Call is a tutor which we'll only worry about next turn. Decides to tutor himself up a Sal Kanar, so Swamp Walk is relevant against all the players in play thanks to our Urborg. Again, it might have been worth going for the Bident onto this player, but I think he's swinging him regardless. It puts either player over here in a difficult position because he's not going to attack in at us most likely. But again, I just want as many tokens as possible so we can start pressuring players. A 16-16 likely to be chump blocked. In fact, he has to this time. So does throw the 3-3 in the way. Voldaren Epicure. When it enters, it's 1 damage to each opponent and create a blood token. Be interesting to see how the Vamp player attacks. He does have a decent sized flyer in play, which can start to take players out. Obviously going to swing in with his 6-6 lifelinker. 5-7 goes down the middle. I'm starting to worry about Jodah quite a bit as well. The Redemption Choir will bring something into play. Decides to reanimate this time the Vampire Cutthroat, Skulk and Lifelink. Oh, and I'm ahead of myself making tokens with this anyway, aren't I? Yeah, I'm making some mistakes this game. Island Walker chump blocks. I'll probably just crack the Wayfarer's Bauble then to give ourselves maximum amounts of mana. Creature dies, Cordial Vampire buffs. So yeah, could have had the Skull Clamp on a creature after all, but not to worry, let's crack the Bauble. At least we can activate this again into the Anointed Procession. So let's just get some white mana. Does give us 1 fewer artifacts, so this has gone down to a 9-9, but I don't think it'll remain that way for long. Don't think we're still going to have time to get down for Dalkin Archmage, unfortunately. I want the Anointed Procession, so yeah, I'll just go for that here. And then we know that we can now counter this thing with the mana drain, so it's not as much of a threat. Their commander they've already replayed once, so it will have 4 command attacks, making it 9. And this has flipped round thanks to the creature that came in previously, so they might be able to afford to recast it actually. Might be best just blowing up the Garth instead. Thinking of going for the Noxious Gearhulk. Yeah, let's go for that now. And destroy this thing. And we just have to assume that they're going to go for that and try to make their stuff unblockable next turn. So destroy that, it's got a decent number of toughness. It was a 9-9, so we go up to 41. Buff the Cordial Vampire army again. So now we want to hold up this mana here for Urza's Saga being activated. It actually can be activated this time, I'll make sure. We've got Mana Drain mana, and then this can be Skull Clamp equipping, and we can throw that on the Burnished Heart just because we're more willing to block with that, and we can always crack it in response if we don't end up using Mana Drain for some reason. So I'll take the Death Toucher down the middle this time, as well as the 10-10. Could be more aggressive with a Lifelinker as well, I suppose. Although they can double block the Lifelinker, so not really much point in doing that. We'll just attack in like that down the middle. All 3 of our opponents are at a similar life total here. 4-4 and the 8-8 are trying to get rid of the token. I mean, I'm actually fine with this because it means that we can get rid of their commander. So, yeah, we'll deal 8 to the commander, assuming that we're not getting weird Magic Online Borkery going on. Yeah, and then this gets debuffed by the commander going down, so that dies anyway. Cordial Vampire, even scarier. And we got a damage through, so Binding of Thassa drawing us again. And there's a Thought Monitor, which we, can't afford to do here, unfortunately. Can't remember if we've even made a land. We could maybe risk getting a land with this and then playing it in and still having the same amount of mana held up. But I won't bother here. So we'll get the 2 constructs from our commander thanks to the Anointed Procession. Make 2 with this land as well at some point. Those are 11/11s that are consistently going to buff each other up. And we'll see if Quezar's mana woes continue. 7 cards in hand. Might be able to continue to get free spells though. Just the 1/1 swinging in over here does not swing in with this. Although our commander isn't an artifact, so it could block there. We go back down to our starting life total when we get hit. And again get into a free spell, which makes sense if they're not drawing into the lands, so Thopter Spy Network. Only triggers at the beginning of the upkeep, really slow this one. I'm wondering if we just need to hold up the mana drain for a board wipe now, because we won't necessarily be as worried about this if we can take this guy out next turn. 1 hit from the Erixmathes might not be the end of the world. A Tolarian Contempt puts a rejection counter on each creature your opponents control. At the beginning of your end step for each opponent, choose up to 1 creature they control with a rejection counter on it, and it goes on the top or bottom of the library. I don't think I want to see that, to be honest. I'm liking our board at the moment, so I'm going to risk using the mana drain on that. Might be that we see an actual board wipe, so it could be a greedy counter, but we're having a fun game here, so I'm not really that worried about it. Mareki doesn't untap during the untap step, but you can gain control of creatures with this. Again, our opponent is missing haste, thankfully. Seems as though he doesn't have a board wipe in this instance. And we know Edgar Markov is in top deck mode. Does decide to cast Solkanar, we're not as worried about that anymore thanks to the lack of a Jodah being in play. This is a 12/12, no buffs on it at the moment. Be interesting to see if he does swing in with it, where he swings in. He tapped down a black mana there. I was worried about a Tainted Strike, I think it's called, to give effect, but it is an Expedition map instead. Tainted Strike on this thing, while it's unblockable, would one-shot someone. Does not decide to attack with his big Swamp Walker. Solkanar, just a big Swamp Walker that we'll have to worry about. Oh, what's that? Mistake number 3? I'm just not reading the cards properly, apparently. Can you tell it's been a rough day today? I had it in my head that this gives everything Swamp Walk for some reason. I'm just reading what I want to read, apparently. It's just a 5/5 Swamp Walk. So, no worries about this being unblockable, apparently. Sanguine Bond, they're not going to combo off here. This is the one, I always get them mixed up. When you gain life, target opponent loses that much. And that is a black spell, so the Swamp King will gain a life. And they are going to gain life from the Redemption Choir. They've slowly got their life total back up to 19. So Redemption Choir going to reanimate something. And it gets back the Stromkirk Noble. I suppose what I could have done in response to this is crack the Burnished Heart to draw cards and try and get into the free counterspell, Fierce Guardianship. Anyway, swung in with everything. He's decided to make his Mutavol a creature. In response to the attacks, it might as well get buffs. Alright, so they decide to just swing in with everything. The Redemption Choir, that's now an 11/11. A 10/10, are these both? Yeah, they're both going over to the middle. Looks like everything is trying to finish off Jodah. He's going to lose twice as much life, just making all the blocks. Loses twice as much life thanks to the Bloodletter Aclazots. And so that player goes down. Sanguine Bond, that is 11 and 6 life gained. So that could take this player out. He's going to focus on us instead, because he feels as though he can take this guy out with attacks, which is fair enough. He's back up to 36 over there. So both of those pointed at us means that we plummet down to 6. Not quite taking us out, thankfully. So I think we just, as opposed to drawing cards with the Burnished Heart, we can do that next turn. I think we just need to make as many tokens as possible and try to deal with the Vamp player. So we've got 4 13/13s at the moment, and they do have Menace, so they can only block 1, meaning that it's, what, 39 damage, so we should be able to take him out next turn. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, is excellent as well. Always wanted to play this, but never get the chance to. We get mana from the Mana Drain. Let's make another couple of constructs, I think, making up for lost time with this. And we never drew into the Soul Ring, so as a Saga can turn into that finally, as it typically does. So these are now 15/15s. Grab the Soul Ring, grab 5 mana from the Mana Drain. Let's just get Tezzeret into play straight away. And it will +2 on this. This is equal to the number of artifacts we control to each opponent, and we gain that much life. So knock this guy down to 20, we go up to 22. I'll make use of the floating mana. Let's just crack the Burnished Heart now. Skull Clamp goes on the stack first apparently, so we might draw into the basics that we want to fetch with Burnished Heart, unfortunately. And we do draw into an island. Just make a couple of islands here. We've got all blue in hand. And now I think we can just turn everything in sideways. Let's buff up the Worm Coil engine. And we'll just swing in with everything. I haven't done the maths, but I think we had him just with these 15/15 menaces previously. Plus we've drained him down now. No cards in hand, so you have to assume that we're going to be able to get this, unless there's something on the board I'm missing, which has happened before. So blocks Worm Coil with the Cordial Vampire. That has Menace. Yeah, he's trying to spread the blocks. He can only block 1 creature here, thanks to the Menace on our artifact creatures. So now decides to just double block on the 1/2, that's fine. And we'll even refill our hand when we do this. So our opponent graciously takes it, goes down to -58, and I've been kicked out into the lobby, so I can't see what we were going to draw into. The odd mistake there, it's going to happen when I spread myself thin across multiple commanders and don't play some decks for a while. But I think ultimately playing it out slow as an Esper player and concentrating on ramp into the board wipe is a decent tactic in a deck that struggles in ramp like Esper tends to, but definitely began to take over in the endgame once our opponents had begun to slow down a lot. The Vamp player could just as easily have had us. That Cordial Vampire, we've seen it do a lot of work over the course of many games on the channel. We were just at 6 life thanks to that Aklazotz, so yeah, double damage with Cordial Vampire is very, very good in these tribal aggro lists. Hopefully you all enjoyed this revisit to an older commander. They don't tend to be as popular, but I like to mix it up a little bit, so hopefully you got some enjoyment from it. Massive thank you to the patrons for their support of the channel as well. They are tireless in their support that they give on here, so I always want to show my appreciation to them. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.